For more on this, we speak to South Sudan analyst Dr. Madut, a Professor of Anthropology at Syracuse University, Maxwell School of Citizenship and Public Affairs. A very good evening to you, and thank you so much for speaking to us. I must say it's quite disappointing to hear over and over in different parts of the continent such allegations. And as we mentioned, these allegations originally surfaced in 2015. Why is there a lack of will to deal with it?
Yes, indeed, ma'am. I think all of us who come from the continent of Africa are tired and fed up with the reports of UN peacekeepers and international NGO workers being involved in some of these heinous crimes. And the reason why, I would say, the reason why there has been no traction in positive responses, justice mechanisms for victims, as well as for ending these terrible crimes, is that these UN peacekeepers, and South Sudan is host to one of the longest serving UN missions, going now on 17 years, is that a lot of these missions don't really have effective host governments that are settling the cases of abuse themselves. So while we have heard so many reports about people in South Sudan being victims to sexual abuse at the hands of their own brethren, it is quite shocking that in addition to these abuses, the international community have deployed UN peacekeepers, international NGO workers, to come and stem this systemic local abuse against local women. Instead of being contributors to the stemming of that tide, they have now been found to have contributed immensely to the suffering of the people by perpetrating the same and very act that they had come into the country to prevent. So it's not shocking, in fact, but it is actually disheartening that the people who have come to rescue our people from local abuses have become the main perpetrators.
So when we're talking about the systemic failures, I'm just wondering, I know some of these reports go as far back as what was happening in the western parts of the country, where a lot of these women and children who got displaced running away from such attacks from the Janjaweed and other insurgents in Darfur ran to these displacement camps, but then there were reports of them even being raped in these displacement camps. Some of them sex for food scandals that has arisen, that they would be forced to perform sexual acts in order to get food. So what I'm wondering is, all of these years, it's not as if the UN system is unaware of this, that NGOs have not been raising it. I mean, to give such access that some of these women and children are washed over at night when they sleep by the perpetrators.
Yeah, so just by way of background, we have to look at the history of the conflicts themselves that have invited international NGOs and UN peacekeeping. There was UNAMID in Darfur. There is UNAMIS with the double S in South Sudan since 2005. And then there was ANIMIS with the one S in South Sudan since 2011. All of them coming into South Sudan and Sudan with a view to stemming the tide of sexual abuse and other kinds of degrading violence episodes perpetrated by local militias, by local armies. But then over time, reports have emerged that it is these would-be protectors who have also engaged in these heinous crimes, being facilitated by the fact that the local people that they have come to protect are very, very poor, very desperate, people who have been displaced from their homes, people who don't have social systems and other networks that can protect them, and were relying on the international system. And so it really brings us to a situation where we have to throw up our hands in the air, where we said the reason why these attacks were happening against local women and girls all these years is that there was no international response to these things. But then to come and realize that these attacks and these violations are happening at the hands of the very people who are supposed to protect these girls and women is most disheartening indeed, and most paralyzing in terms of action. So it is very timely and quite elating to hear that the top official in the United Nations system, Antonio Guterres, the Secretary General of the United Nations, now saying that he himself is tired and sick of hearing about UN workers attacking local people they had come to protect. And then when he ordered investigations in order to get to the bottom of this, he has not been able to do so because people are intransigent and no credible reports have come out in order for these reports to be used as a way to stop these things. So I think his frustration is shared by the victims, is shared by those of us who have watched the system, and it is time that people put action behind their words.
But some of those who've not only known of these reports but presided over them are high-ranking UN peacekeeping officials, and activists have long said the problem is that they too enjoy protection. So the UN Secretary General recently announced Sarah Bayeslo-Nyati is the deputy head of the South Sudan UN peacekeeping mission. So I'm just trying to understand the kind of pushback that she can expect. She says she's alarmed that the cases have increased exponentially since the years. What should she start by dealing with first?
Well, I think the real issue here is that crimes have been committed by people who are supposed to prevent it. And that the UN peacekeeping mission in South Sudan, as it is everywhere else on the African continent, has to master a muscle at the top, at the level of the SRSG, to say to its senior officials that you have to bring me the final investigation about who did what, when, and where, so that they can now bring them to book. But she has to, these are all her staff. These are all members of her team. And if they are the ones involved in these things, or they are the ones protecting the perpetrators, then the time has come for her to say, come here into my office and tell me what has happened. What do you know? And get to the bottom of this at that level, and then report to the Secretary General about what she finds. Otherwise, we are going to be in this cycle where we send peacekeepers to go and protect people, and the peacekeepers engage in perpetration of these crimes, and then we never get to see how we are going to be an international system that enforces rules and regulations and protection of people when the states, like in South Sudan, in Congo, are not willing or unable to protect their citizens. This is really the whole reason why we have a United Nations peacekeeping missions. It's because the governments of the given states are unable to execute their fundamental responsibility of being the providers of the basic protection.
Dr. Jock Madut. Jock, thank you so much for speaking to us. He is South Sudan analyst, also a professor of anthropology at the Syracuse University, Maxwell School of Citizenship and Public Affairs. He speaks to us from Juba.